And I've been on the phone a lot recently, a lot of video calls like this too, with just like meetings, business meetings, all sorts of stuff, client meetings, and then podcasts and general conversations. And I'm like, I just was talking to a friend and client on the phone this morning who tagged out, and he's just jacked up. It's like his first mature buck, like really mature buck, and he's put a lot of time into it. And it's like, I don't remember. I thought we already had this conversation. Maybe I didn't have this conversation with you. It was just like everything was like a blur because this time of the year is just like there's so much going on, but it's all good. It's just, like I said, busy time.
I'm sure it's probably like pretty hands off as far as your clients go, with it being this time of year, maybe. But
Yeah. Well, I was actually just out this afternoon. I met a drone sprayer out. We're treating cool season grasses and some invasives. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, not not doing anything on property. Had a couple projects that was still trying to wrap up, some late, let's just call them late decisions that were made um, on the Iowa property that I manage. And basically, I pulled the plug on it. I was like, I don't think it's worth going in there and doing this type of project right now. It's just not worth the pressure. So we're just going to try and slip in. He wants to put up a couple extra box blinds, uh, some areas that basically his tillable land, parts of his tillable land, he cash rents, and this year we're saving some of it for late season and creating better screening cover in areas where there's not very good edges. Leaving some corn stand. But yeah, so we're just gonna wait until get through this like peak of season and then slip in there. And it's a minimally invasive job to begin with. It's just commotion on the property that's unnecessary. So we'll slip in later on, put them up. And I've actually got the same thing on our property. A bunch of my cousins and my dad decided that they want to get some box blinds out, which I think is great because now they actually have like dedicated spots to hunt instead of just like rambling around. So I was like, yeah, I'll hook you up as long as I can help you put them out, so they're not just like in random spots. So that's probably the next big project here in the next couple of weeks. I'm just kind of staying as hands off as I can for right now, honestly.
sure, yeah, that's understandable. How did your season go? I guess I haven't really talked to you in a while. I guess since season started, I would say.
Yeah, my season. I mean, it was pretty efficient. Let's say that. I mean, I filled all my tags quite quickly. Um, I went out west first week of September on a tag that took me a few years to draw, and it's about the third, well, really only the second time to this specific spot, third time in this general unit. This area we found up in the high country above tree line. We found it. It was like our plan C location the last trip out there, where we just kind of kept bouncing around and trying to avoid pressure and find, a spot where there were animals, right? Found it like the last day of the hunt and immediately turned up some incredible animals. So basically ran out of time, and it was like, when we come back here, we're going to pick up where we left off. Fast forward a few years, and I'm going out with a different buddy. The other guy couldn't make it, but I went out with a different buddy who him and I hunt a lot out west together, and we just hunt really well together.
Hmm.
Anyways, we went out, and I was like, I don't know, I can't guarantee anything, but this is what I know. And obviously everything was positive at that point. And anyways, long story short, we got out there a couple days before season, spent 2 days scouting, and for the most part fell right back into where I left off. Like, we were turning up good deer. I bet we turned up well over 100 bucks in the time that we were there, just climbing mountains and glassing, and had some really good stalks and killed my first velvet mule deer, like good velvet mule deer. I've killed some other smaller ones, but like a pretty good one. It was a pretty wild stalk, just like kind of more epic shit that you pull off when you're out in like backcountry. You know what I mean? Or it's
Something
like,
you dream about that you don't think is necessarily
well,
realistic until it
it's
happens.
yeah, you know, and from like the perspective of just being a man in the modern era, you know, it's like, what's the most challenging thing you do on a daily basis? Like, you know, keep your checking account where you want it, right? You know, it's like that's
Yeah.
like the new social like challenge, right? Or just like managing your life in general. It's just, but it's all just like, you know, what modern life is versus like what primitive things that we were built for were, right? It's like challenging
Mhm.
yourself mentally, challenging yourself physically. And, you know, like as simple a thing as climbing through steep, sharp rocks in nothing but your socks is a challenge, right? And at the same time, actually, what I found out this year is it's far more challenging to maneuver on a grassy hillside that's super steep in socks because your foot like rolls in them and it's just like there's no stability. Which ultimately, at the moment of truth, I found myself in this position where I had to dig my toes barefooted, you know, through my socks, push them into the ground as hard as I could and stand up like halfway to take this shot, and I was shaking so bad. But it was like, you know, I just pulled through that shot just, you know, perfectly enough where everything settled in and it broke clean, and that arrow just went and just dropped right into where that pin sat. And I mean, it was a hard quartering two shot. I wouldn't say hard, but pretty quartering two at 81 yards, and
There's
it
not
just
much margin for error there at all.
there's almost no margin for error. But the wind just like laid down perfectly at that moment. Everything just it just happened, just felt right. And I feel like I do a pretty good job of like telling myself like what I can and can't do, like pushing the limits on shots. And I've killed, I mean, out west is a different game. Mule deer, antelope are the same. They don't generally react to the string. You know,
Mhm.
they're just kind of like, what's up? And then, you know, they freak out, but it's like that momentary pause. They're not like the whitetail where like they are so switched on. You know, I've missed whitetail does from the ground at 20 yards because they jump the string and I shoot over the top of them.
What do you
But
think the reason for that is, if you had to guess?
I think
Just
that's a good question. You know, obviously it's something with their biology and their environment. I think that they're just more programmed to like hold tight for a second, and also they're probably just not as used to getting shot at or messed with. You know, to be honest
yeah,
with you.
it's just a less common instance for them to
Yeah.
run into
Well,
out
but on
there
the
for
other
sure,
hand,
yeah.
you know, you say that, but I've hunted whitetails or coos deer, cows deer, however you say it. I've heard it both ways from different biologists and whatnot. But you know what I'm talking about, the little whitetails out in Arizona and you know, like right on the border of Mexico. And from afar, you're watching them. They look just like a normal whitetail, but smaller. You know, like the bucks look like, you know, they got like a short snout. They kind of look like little bulldogs. The mature bucks do. And then you get up to them and see how flighty and flinchy those things are. It's insane. And on top of it, they're actually only like 65 pounds. I mean, they're extremely small. They're like you know, like what the fawns look like right now when you're out hunting. They're about that size, but their legs are shorter, and they're tuned up too. But they're in an environment where there's coyotes and bobcats and mountain lions and the same out west. You know, the last mule deer I shot that actually had velvet on it, uh, it had. I mean, it's one of its ears was all shredded up, and it had like visible, healed over, but visible claw marks on its rear end, like something grabbed it and it got away. It was pretty wild, but yeah, I don't know. But they generally just stand still, and that's the second mule deer that I've shot at that almost that exact range, almost at that exact shot angle as well. Because you know a lot of times it's like you know like in this situation, I popped out, and what happened was I was following these bucks. I was descending from the top of the mountain down above them. I'd spotted them from across the way, across this big drainage, probably I think I had to go like a mile, 1.6 miles or so down and around to get above them. And I was working down on them, but they were moving. They weren't bedded at this point. So I was trying to like kind of cut them off and, also play the wind and all this stuff. And there's two bucks. One was, and they were, if I were to say I had to throw a tape on them just to quantify the size of their antlers, I'd say they're pretty similar. One was a big 3x4. The other one was a big 4x4, heavier, a little bit narrower, but visibly a more mature buck, like really dark gray body, big blocky head, big deep chest. And the other one was a younger buck, had a bigger frame, but had like a really orange coat on him. And just in my mind, for whatever reason, I'm like, if I'll push come to shove, I'll shoot either one. I'm not that picky, right? But I'm like, I want that old mature buck. So as I'm like tracking him down this hill and like, like stalking down through the rocks and then getting to the grass and getting to some more like clumps of vegetation, just using cover, waiting for them to go behind cover and maneuvering. I get to where I can see this. I can see the younger one, and the older one's closer to me, and he like kind of maneuvers and gets behind some brush. And then the other one gets behind some brush, and I get down, I get another set of eyes on him, like another window, and I can see the younger one, and I range him, and he's only at like 65 yards. I'm like, oh man, I can get him. But the last place I saw that other buck, he was like right there. I'm like, well, if I can actually get up around this corner, I'm either going to have a better shot at the younger one, but maybe that older one is like right here where I'd last saw him. So basically I worked my way down there, and I've got my arrow knocked. I'm ready to go, but in my mind, I want to get as close as possible, obviously. And I see the one buck, and I range him, and he's right around that like 62, 65 yard mark. I just keep on like kind of peeking further around this corner. I'm peeking and I'm looking, I'm just ready to grab a range and be ready. But, as I'm doing this, I'm exposing myself more and more and more and more. And I'm like inching out and inching out. And all of a sudden I don't see anything. And then I like kind of come back and my eyes track and I pick out. And this is something that I've kind of noticed out there, like finding these mule deer, whether it's in the like the prairies or up in the mountains, like when they're in the shadows, like this kind of, especially on those mature bucks, this kind of like white triangle. At least that's how my eye like catches it. It's like, like the sides of their head, So I'm like panning back through and I catch that in the shadow, and my eyes kind of, it takes like just a split second to kind of adjust from this really sunny opening to the shadow. And I'm like, fuck, there he is. He's standing right there looking right at me. So I'm like, range him 81 yards, range the other one who is now like aware of my presence, slowly walking away because they don't really know what's going on, because it's like, this freaking Sasquatch is like leaning out from around this clump of shit on the hillside. And this, the thermals are rising, so my wind and everything is good. But now they're both at basically 80 yards. I'm like, well, that's the easy decision. I'm going for the deer that I wanted to go for anyways, right? And yeah, I settled in, pulled through the shot. Arrow was, massive, massive trauma. That arrow went in. Now he's 81 yards, and I'm probably 40, 50 feet above him, realistically. So that shot angle, went in right above his shoulder, and it came out right in front of his rear leg. But then it kept going and it broke his rear leg, went back in and through and broke his rear leg.
So not only did it clean him all the way out, probably through the cavity, but then it slowed him down even more, taking out one of his legs on top of it.
Yeah. If you're looking at it from a vital perspective, it's double lung, liver, gut, just barely got the guts as it was going out. And then somehow, I think it was because he turned that direction, then it still hit that back leg and broke the femur. And he still made it like 200 yards straight down on the bottom of this big drainage, so
of course that's what
yeah, but it's nice, compared to like, the idea of packing out an elk or a moose or something, two guys, you can break down a deer and pack them. It sucks, right? It's just part of that suffering that you endure as a hunter, and you know it. And it's just like, yeah, I know this sucks, but I know where the end is, and it's also going to be so worth it when you're there, right? Um, no, that was really good. And then, I mean, the trip was wild as far as weather. We had a lot of like nasty weather, and it was actually, you probably saw those two hunters that got hit by lightning out there in
It's a
Colorado.
real it's something you don't think about, but, like, it's a harsh reality that it's
Well,
pretty unforgiving out there. You really don't know what is gonna happen.
yeah, I mean, I took a video. Uh, I took a lot of videos through phone scope or not phone scope. I just got some like knockoff or not even. It's just like some apparatus, that holds onto my thing, which I actually like better than most of the magnet ones. But anyways, I took a video one night in our tent. We were laying out there, and it was like sleeting and snowing and lightning like crazy. And when you're up that high, we were at 12,500 feet of elevation with a far above tree line. It's like basically the Alaskan tundra up there, and the lightning just like cracks, and that thunder just reverberates, and it's just like penetrates you. It's like holy shit. And we're like, I'm laying there. I'm kind of actually at the time just kind of like in awe and like kind of enjoying it. And my buddy's like, should we be worried right now? Like that sounds close. And I'm like, well, we're tucked in the best we can be tucked in. We got this 500-foot hill behind us that's almost straight up, blocking all the wind from one direction. And then we've got a wall of the only trees in the area in front of us, and they're all like 15 feet high. And we're like tucked in this little pocket. I was like, there's nothing better we can do. I mean, do you want to hike 4 miles back to the truck right now during this? You think that's safe, right? So,
Yeah.
but it all worked out. So that was the first part of my season.
You can, yeah, go right into the whitetail part of it because I think I've probably seen you shared quite a bit of your Western trip on, like, your stories and stuff, um, that I kind of seen bits and pieces of, but as far as the
Yeah.
whitetails, I feel like I've just seen maybe the aftermath. I don't think you shared
Well,
much about it.
yeah, I didn't share much. I mean, the whitetail thing is so different because, I'm always very hesitant to share too much about a deer I'm actively pursuing. Obviously, it's a small world, and,
People
you know,
figure stuff out fast,
people,
and you're no
yeah, and just
stranger. I mean,
correct. And I'm, it's not like I'm not trying to hide anything from the people that are in my like circle around the property and stuff, because most of the neighbors know. I just literally just got off the phone with one of my Amish neighbors right now, and he was telling me about the things that they've been seeing the last, week or two hunting, and I told him everything that I knew about every deer that I knew, was worth talking about on the farm. It's just a big uh, main philosophy really when it comes to managing a property. I think that if you can get your neighbors to share the same goals as you, that all of your goals are going to, you know, be be higher in quality and quantity. But anyway, uh, yeah. So I just don't share a ton on social media with that stuff, and also like, I mean, I kind of just like check out from the world for periods of time because I get so invested in
yeah,
it, right? It's like
it's healthy to do that too, though,
it is for sure. I
just for
mean, yeah,
yourself.
it's like kind of, I just end up kicking the can on everything in my life that I can kick the can on. Families obviously still priority has to be like the main priority, but I'm always like, well, what can I shuffle around to do this and go do that? But anyways, I only hunted 5 days this season for whitetails. And all 5 times that I hunted, I had eyes on my target buck. And I just was like trying to be super calculated, and I say that, okay, I hunted 5 times, but full 100% disclosure, I scouted, I spent 15 days, 15 like trips, I'm like back at the farm doing this, and then I like, purposely stay out of an area, and I'm trying to fix this or do that, and I like go pop in and do this, right? Camera work, whatever. But I would say, my scouting and obviously my hunting is far more strategic than it ever has been. It always, it's obviously always kind of increasing in that regard. And it's mostly promoted by the lack of time. It's easy for me to plan out that night that I know I'm going to be home late, or that morning I have to leave early, and like pop in and out to like do some quick scouting or check on this, check on that. Right. So anyways, I started out the season. I had two bucks, two target bucks, call them that. One my main target buck, 5-year-old 10-pointer, really nice deer, probably in the 160 class range, like super tall, not super wide, but just a big old brute of a 10-point deer. And I kind of had him dialed in just from past history, and he flew under the radar last year because he broke off an entire main beam and half of his other main beam in velvet somehow. So he was running around as this half rack with a 13 and 14 inch G2 and G3 on one side. And actually, ironically, found his shed. Just kind of stumbled upon it turkey hunting this spring. Wasn't really looking for it, but anyways, so he was around, and I had him kind of dialed in, and I was really excited about getting it done early season, because I love early season hunting, and I just love, probably mostly because I love to be like, feel like I have a really solid plan.
It fits your strategic mindset because it
You
plays
can
into that a little
correct.
bit. You can actually, it's not pattern. I don't want to say that because it sounds like it's like a guarantee,
Mm-hmm.
but you can use your knowledge a little bit more than like this time of
Well,
year. It's kind of all out of your hands essentially.
yeah, and the other thing that I like about it, and whether it's what I like about mule deer hunting or what I like about whitetail hunting, it's the same thing. It is that, like, you've got some time, obviously hunting back home, whitetails, there's like that home field advantage, but ultimately you have some time to observe, put together a good plan, make calculated decisions. And it's not so much like this rut time of the year where it's like, I got to either be in there or stay the hell out of there. It's like, there's just like go, 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 or move. Right. But yeah, I just like that part of it. I like to be more calculated. But anyway, so yeah, early season, I'm on this buck. I mean, I had him pretty much dialed, just kind of waiting, because it was a really tricky spot to hunt him in. It's like it's super close to the road, right next to the farm. A lot of pressure, a lot of activity, and not a lot of space. I mean, from the field edge into the timber before it drops off and goes down in the valley, it's probably only, in this specific spot, it's probably only and 100 yards max total depth, and the property line splits like right in the middle of that. So there's not a lot of space to get in there and work, and on top of that, it's easy access because you cross in the field, but it's impossible exit because you have to cross the main and also destination food source. And that's the challenge in hunting the area I challenge, or the area that I hunt, is it's all edge, which is advantageous and also like really hard at the same time, right? It's just all like everything's all, maximum surface area because it's all field edges and this and that, and there are chunks of timber, but that's when you start dropping down. The thermals are hard to hunt and access, and all that stuff is kind of wild. But anyways, this buck was hanging out in this spot and showing up in these alfalfa fields pretty consistently throughout the summer, and I slipped in there early August, I believe, and hung a camera, a cell cam. I only run a couple cell cams, not too many. But I was just like, I just want to kind of like see like how predictable he actually is, right? And my nephew's on my cell cam account. And it was funny because I hung that camera. I strategically waited for a rainy day to go in there because I figured he's probably bedding really close in this area. And again, there's not a lot of space in there. So I was like, I'm going to wait for a rainy day, slip in, and I get in there, and I'm like, geez, there's like trails everywhere in the spot. It all kind of condenses in one area, but there's still like a lot of trails. And like in that situation, I'm you really have to mitigate pressure. That's why I'm doing it in the rain, under some concealment. But
Yes.
ultimately, you can't just throw a camera up all willy nilly. So I had to put that thing high and point it down. And then when you do that, your target range shrinks down so much, and you have to be very specific with what you're aiming at. And it wasn't like a scrape or anything at that time of the year to target. So I was literally just like, man, I feel like, just today, based on these conditions, I feel like he's got to be over in this area and he's going to come up through this spot. And I hung that camera. I'm like, one way or another, I don't care. It's a sampling. That's all. I just want to be able to check in and make sure he's still like in that corner of the farm. And I get a text like, I don't even get back home. I get a text from my nephew. He's like, only you would hang a camera and get your target buck on it an hour later. And I was like, oh, I guess he's there, right? I'm like, so that's nice.
Yeah.
So anyways, that was summer scouting. I didn't do a whole lot of crazy stuff, a couple food plots and whatnot, and then got ready for this. And I was pretty confident I was going to kill that deer early season. I didn't know exactly how it was going to work out. So once season got around, I think it was, I didn't hunt at all. Opening weekend was pretty warm. I live for that first cold front in September. That's where I make my money, man. It's like,
Yeah. I've had really good luck in seeing some good bucks like that end of September. And that's probably one that was those first, there was like
that first cold
it was
front.
like a Wednesday through that first, it was like maybe a week into season. It was like Wednesday through that second Saturday. It was
that's exactly it.
Seasonably cool. And it was very, very good for movement from what I've seen.
Yeah. And so I think that's when I made my first approach. So knowing that buck was, spent a lot of time in that specific area, that was, from my observations in the last 2 years, that was more of his like summer range. And then in the fall, he actually shifts across the road more into the core of our property, which is nice. And that's where I saw him a ton last year. So I was kind of already playing that, that chess game with him. And my nephew also called me one night and was like, hey, we just saw, they called him Dandelion, this buck. They called him the Amish named him this. And I asked him like, where does that even come from? He's like, well, we just figured he was quite a dandy of a buck. So we call him the Dandelion buck. And I was like, all right, I'm good with it. Like, I don't,
Sure.
like, if you want to put a number on him, I don't care. It's just better than being like that 10-pointer or that 8-point, you know what I mean? So it's just like, it is what it is. But so Dandelion, he calls me, he's like, yeah, we just saw Dandelion going across the road, heading that, into this chunk of woods. And I was like, I gotta get a camera up over there. So the next time I was back, I threw another camera up, my other cell cam, basically just across the road on a community scrape right on the field edge. There's kind of a grass waterway where, again, it's a hard spot to see from the road that runs right on top of the ridge. And so I threw a camera up over there. And then, it was like a week or two later. It was earlier in the season. Oh, it was right before. It was a couple days before that cold front that we were talking about. And I got a picture of him on that camera. And I was like, okay. So when the time came to hunt a couple days later, the tactic I always employ pretty much year round is this like concept of hunting from the outside in, right? So basically my first move on this buck is I'm going to hunt the outermost area somewhere of what I think his core range is at any given time in the season. And that just happened to be in this situation. If I got that picture of him the day before, I'm like, well, maybe he's across the road. And if he is across the road right now, because that is his fall range, and a lot of times these bucks will do that early season. They'll dip over in their fall range for a few days and come back. It's almost like they're checking in, taking inventory, whatever. So I was like, well, if he is over there, then I know I can't shoot my shot to hunt this easy access hard exit spot, right? I can only hunt that a couple times and then it's burnt, done. So I'm like, well, I'm going to start from the outside in and thinking about him being in this general area. Where would he be given the wind, given the food, the time of the year, and the current pressure, right? Those 4 key elements that I talk about. And that led me to go basically do an observation type sit / hunt over the food plot where I killed my buck last year, which is a total observation type hunt. It just happened to be last year that I found my buck in that valley right away, and then ended up, shooting him at 45 yards on that food plot. So anyways, I get down in there, and my first hunt of the season, for Wisconsin whitetails, and saw some deer. Saw a really nice 4-year-old. Nothing in range, a couple does in range, I think, but the other bucks are like down across in the timber, and they're all going after apples, and then they come up and hit the bottom edge of the food plot. And so I'm like, okay, they kind of work their way off, head up towards the ag fields on top, and I've got really good, not really good, but decent access. There's a cornfield down this bottom, and when the corn's up, I can like slip in the end of the field, work my way through the corn. It really sucks, like trying to navigate through a cornfield with a bow and all your stuff, but you can do it and go slow, and you've got a good cover, so I can get in there. And anyways, those deer come through, and they kind of work off, and in my mind, I'm just like, well, it's that's movement. Like movement just happened. Like the deer moved, and I've got 20 minutes of daylight left. I'm like, I'm just gonna get out of here as fast as I can and see if I can get back up on that ridge and get eyes on these other fields and see if I can find the dandelion buck. So I get up there, get to my truck, get all my outer layers and everything off, throw my truck clothes back on, jump in the truck, get down the road. By the time I get to where I can see these fields, I'm like scrambling, digging. I'm like, shit, I don't even have my binos because they're still in the pile of gear that I haven't like put away from getting back from out west, right? So I'm like, oh shit, I've got my camera. So I grab my DSLR with a 200 millimeter lens on it, and I just crank the ISO like as high as it goes, and I just like looking at the spot in the field where I thought I saw like kind of a white spot, thinking it's a deer, and I like then in the camera, like, oh, it's just like a poplar tree. That's the last light's just hitting it just right. It's kind of glowing, right? And as I bring the camera down, boom, there he is. He's laying in the alfalfa field, like 250 yards off the road. So I'm like, okay, so that's my first hunt. Technically, I didn't encounter him while I was hunting, but to me, every hunt's an observation sit, and every observation sit's technically a hunt, right? Like that's just kind of that mindset. Even out west, like when it's season, you've got your bow there and you're ready to move. So anyways, he's there. So the next night, the wind that during that cold front was just squirrely as shit. It was like as soon as it got cold, it was like northwest, if I remember, and then it went to no, I think it was northwest for like 3 days, and then or like one day it went like hard west, southwest, and then flipped back or something. But anyway, so the next night I head back and forget what I did. Usually if I go back for an afternoon hunt, I go a little early and I do some scouting somewhere else on the farm and throw up a camera or something, or I try and do it like in little increments. But anyways, I go back and have my e-bike with this time, and mobile stand set up. I'm still just running freaking old school lone wolves, like the small platforms and 4 sticks. And then, so I take that and outside in mentality, like, okay, there's this back corner where I really want to go, where I know that I can kill this deer. But again, I'm just like so hesitant to make that move because I
Mhm.
know I can only do it like maybe once if I'm lucky. But where they cut this field corner, they come out roughly where that ideal location is, and they drop in this other spot. So I'm like, I'll go to this other spot because it's easier to get out from here. And I get out, and it's the north facing tree line on this like finger that protrudes out into the field. And the reason I say that is because when you have a north facing tree line, the trees always lean just kind of a weird way, and there's always more branches on them because they don't get as much sun, right? uh, so it's sometimes can be a real pain in the ass is what I'm getting at. And so anyways, to find a tree that I can get up in and not have to trim like a massive amount of limbs off to get shots and stuff was a little tricky, but I found one, got in there, got set up. I think I only actually went like 2 sticks high to get to where I could see and shoot as much as
Mhm.
possible. And anyway, so I'm set up, feeling pretty good about the setup, and lo and behold, the first deer I saw. No, I take it back. There's 2 does popped out, and then they disappeared. The next deer I saw a few minutes later was dandelion buck. Pops out of the woods, or I guess I can't confirm where he popped out, but when I noticed him, he was probably 10 to 12 feet away from the woods, right in that area where I anticipated. And at that point, he's 125 yards, 130-ish yards away. looking large as life and just feeding right towards me. And I'm like, all right, here we go. It's on, right? And
Hmm.
I'm just trying to keep my shit together essentially. And then all of a sudden, there's like they're chopping corn silage on the farm. There's like semis whipping by and Jake braking not that far from me. But all of a sudden there's just like, and this Amish buggy's coming down the road, and that deer is just like gone. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. So the whole field cleared. A couple other does, and there were some other deer that I couldn't see until they ran. I just saw some whitetails. But I'm like, all right, whatever. So I just got out of there, like left the stand, left my camera arm, left everything, took my bow and the stuff that you don't want to get rained on out there. Got out, jumped on the bike, went way back. Yeah, I parked my truck like a long ways away. Go home, whatever, regroup. Next night, I'm like, all right, I'm going for it. I'm going for it, right? So I go a little bit early, pull that stand set up, move it across to that spot across the field, get all set up, trim a couple branches, just money spot, like the perfect tree. Like I can shoot like
Yeah.
4 different lanes in the woods. I can shoot like 3 different spots out in the field, but I'm like tucked back in the shadows. I've got the right branches in front of me, like concealing me. I'm like, this just feels good. And there's deer all over that night out in those fields. It's interesting where I was sitting, I can see like the whole road, the whole ridge top, but I'm elevated and you can see these deer popping out these blind corners and cars are whipping by from the road and they can't see the deer. So it's really cool to observe from that perspective. But yeah, ultimately, it was a little later that night, but probably a half hour, 45 minutes before dark, dandelion buck pops out. Where does he pop out? Directly below where I was set up the previous night and starts feeding towards me, coming, kind of gets hung up for a little while. And all of a sudden, at the same time, there's 2 trucks coming down the road, a semi hauling corn silage and a dump truck. And at the same time, an Amish buggy's coming down the road, and they all just happen to converge in the only spot where you can see the back corner of the field from the road. So it's like direct line of sight for where this buck is. And they all come down and there's like brakes screeching and the horse click clacking and that buck. And then on top of that, I've got like 7 does underneath me that are catching me moving around because I'm trying to get video of this deer and they're blowing. So that buck is like on alert, trying to figure out what they're alert about. And then gets blown off from the road and he turned and ran right back down the woods. So that was that. And then after that, I was like, well, man, I got to figure something out. So I'm not just playing cat and mouse with this deer. So I waited actually that weekend. It got hot again, real windy. I went out and I was like, I want to just try and create some level of attraction to this spot, even if it's just for more consistent pictures or, just understanding how often he's actually there. So I went out and I dropped a water hole in. I put one of those earth ponds in and, middle of the day when it was windy out, took the tractor, tote full of water, dug it in, dropped it in, backfilled, filled it up and got out of there. Readjusted the camera and got out of there. Within a few hours, there was deer on it. And then, they're sniffing around. They're kind of cautious, but they drink. And then the next day, it's just like a normal thing. And a few days later, that buck shows up on it. And so I'm like, okay. So now fast forward, we are at Monday, October 6th. And I'm, that was the next cold front, essentially, kind of a drab, cloudy day. I was like, okay, I got to get out there today. I think it's either going to be today or tomorrow is going to be the time. But I just kind of wanted to get out there and see what was going on. So I was actually on my way back to the farm and my nephew texts me again and he's like, oh, I bet you wish you would have hunted this morning. I hadn't even checked. I don't have push notifications on for cell cams on my phone because they annoy me. And it's just too much. Like I want to check in and check out from that flow of information. So anyways, I hadn't even looked at it. Never even crossed my mind because I already had planned to go back and hunt and that I was going to hunt tonight or that night and the next night. And usually when I go back to the farm, I can find my target buck within 36 hours, or I can't find him and I just pull out and come back, recalibrate. And
Mhm.
anyway, so I was on my way back. He texted me. I look at it. That buck was there at 7:30 in the morning, drink or like just checking that water hole out. And then he came back again at 11:30. And I was like, I texted him. I'm like, I would almost guarantee he's bedding pretty close to that. He's just kind of lingering in that area. So when I got there, I got ready to go, head out. Stands already hung at this point, so that was good. Um, but I was just really nervous. I'm like, man, this buck's probably bedded within 50 yards of the stand. So I waited. On the forecast, it was a northwest wind, but on the forecast, there was like some random clouds that were going to come over. It was supposed to rain for like a half hour period of time, and so I was trying to time it to get out to the woods right around that time to have some cover noise and whatnot. And it never ended up raining. But when that cloud came over, or that series of clouds came over, the wind really died down and the thermals kind of started pushing up out of this valley. So it was almost like an east wind. So it worked out for me. I took the bike, zipped right up tight to the field. I literally just have to lay the bike down, take like 4 steps, and I'm up in the tree. And I can get to the base of the tree. I parked the bike right on the edge of the field, and I'm glassing, looking at everything I can possibly look at. I wait and I wait and I wait. I probably waited a solid 5 minutes. And the moment that I went to lean the bike down, out of the corner of my eye, I see a brown body and a flash of white just like slips away. Doesn't break a branch. You don't even hear it. Just like slips away. It was bedded 15 feet inside the edge of the woods. And it disappeared, went down the hill into the valley. And right away my gut just dropped. And I was like, that was him. Like, it had to have been him. I never saw the head. There's no guarantee, but usually a buck doesn't make noise when you bump them out of a bed. They just slip out. And immediately I checked the wind and I was like, well, the wind's in my face. There's no way he smelled me. And maybe he heard me a little bit when I like was crunching through the alfalfa on that bike. Maybe he saw me a little bit. Maybe he heard me just enough to like put him on alert, and then he caught some movement on the edge. And they're so used to getting bumped off that field edge that he's just like, I'm out of here, right? So I'm like, whatever, I'm here. I drove an hour. I'm ready. I'm hunting, right? So I get up in the tree, and the only deer I saw that night was him. And like at 6 o'clock, I look straight to the east, and there he is coming in. So in my mind, if it was him, when I bumped him, he barreled off this ridge, dropped down, like basically went out this point, made a lap around, and then came back up the other side of that point. Whether he did it, over the course of 3 hours or looped around and then eventually came back up. But the other reason I think it was him is because the moment that I could see him, he was licking his nose and trying to smell what was going on. And they do that a lot during the rut, but they don't do that a whole lot on October 6th. So he works his way in. He's coming right down the trail. Everything's working exactly how I envisioned it in my brain, right? He's going to come in. He's going to go to this mock scrape or this water hole. It's going to put him at 22 yards in this nice shooting window, and everything's going to be awesome. My pin's already set to 20. Everything's knocked, locked, ready to go, right? He just keeps on hanging up and licking his nose and licking his nose and licking his nose. And then he's licking his balls, and then he's licking his nose. And it's like, come on. Like, I'm like, just like, breathe, take a breath, take a breath. And I'm trying to get a little video, but I'm in this like total like video second thing. Like, I get a little
Yeah.
B-roll, and I've got the camera pointed towards the water hole. So if he would have came in, I would have gotten some pretty good footage of him, most likely. But ultimately, he's hanging up, and I'm just kind of like watching him through my rangefinder in case he takes an alternative route. Last I ranged him, he was at 47 yards, and he's coming in. Again, we're talking like painstakingly slow. And all of a sudden he veers and he starts to go. He's trying to get my wind, or the wind of whatever he thinks is there. And he just is kind of going, and I'm like, oh man, like 3 more steps, he's got my wind. It's over. Because I was checking the wind, and it's over, right? And he stops in this one spot, and I was just like, I'm standing here with my bow like this. I can see him almost clear as day, but then I like start to draw back, and then all of a sudden you kind of realize like, oh, there's a branch right in front of me, and then out a ways there's another branch. So basically, I come to full draw. I'm trying to guess the yardage in my head. I'm like, man, he's got to be right around that 30, which I think in hindsight, reflecting back on my failure, I think that I overcompensated with my 20-yard pin for 30. Because in my brain, I thought 30 the whole time. And ultimately, I ranged the spot. Ranged, my cousin was there. He stood there. I ranged him. It was 30. But I held too high, or that, and or the combination of that, and I had to turn all the way to the tight side of the tree, and I basically had to kneel down on the platform to get low enough to shoot under these branches. And I've got that camera I mount right on my bow sight, that old school Tacticam, so it sees everything that I see essentially, right? It's not like, I don't like those stabilizer ones because it's not the same view. So, and usually when I shoot with that, it's like, the bow kind of jumps and that's it. And when I shot this, it was like, it was like kind of just squirrely. So that told me that I had my bow torqued really funny. But anyways, I hit him high through the shoulder, and that arrow went in. I'll text you the video of it. Because I've got like a GoPro over my shoulder, and then the Tacticam. So they're not like the high resolution videos, but it's enough to tell the story, like to kind of see. So you can kind of process how, like, my mindset at the time, right? Because then you're just like, and I've hit a deer in a very similar spot like that before. The sun was hitting my sight kind of funny, and I just couldn't get my peep lined up, and I shot, and everyone in the world told me that that deer is alive. It's walking away. You're never going to find that deer. And that deer died in 50 yards. It went just over the hill where I couldn't see it and died. I waited like 7 hours, was waiting for a guy with a dog, and ultimately went out there. I literally took like 2 steps past where the arrow was on the ground, and I could see over the hill, and the deer was laying there. So he died instantly. Same, very similar scenario with this deer. But I hit him high, and that arrow went all the way in. I mean, my arrows are 32 inches long. I don't cut my arrows. They went all the way in, probably 18 inches, and just smashed something super hard on the backside of that deer. And when he jumped, he mule kicked, and when he was running off, that arrow was rock solid. It wasn't moving at all with his shoulder. And instantly, I mean, in the camera, in the video, you can hear, I'm just like, fuck, because I knew it. I knew it. It's like, again, I it's like my first thought always goes back to like, man, how did you hit a baseball 81 fucking yards on a mountainside, and you can't hit a pie plate at 30 yards from a tree stand? I'm like,
Yep.
when I'm giving myself a pep talk or talking shit to myself. But anyway, so hit him high. I immediately, I knew it was bad. So I backed out and replayed all the footage. My cousin was at the farm, showing it to him. Drove back home that night. I cut together this here. I'll text it to you right now, and then you can just watch it, and then I don't have to describe it to you, right?
Yeah.
I kind of forget sometimes about technology. Um, but yeah, I just kept on playing that, both mentally and literally on the video, like just playing it over and over, just trying to, like, at that point it didn't really matter because I was waiting. I was committed to waiting until the next day anyways. But since I came across that, I'll text you this mule deer pick. But anyway, I backed out, came back in the next day, right at first light. I waited till it was light enough that I could see well, and went in, and I couldn't find any blood, which I anticipated because the entrance was so high and there was no exit. It just smashed something super hard. So I tracked him purely off of tracks. Why can't I find this? I got too much crap on my phone. I tracked him purely off of tracks and tracks alone. What I thought were his tracks based on like just kind of where he was going, dropping down the hill, because there's deer tracks all over the place in there. And basically tracked him down to the bottom of this hill. And I'm going to text you this picture. This is the one I took through my binos. in that field that night. So that'll give you an idea of the deer because it's kind of hard to see what he looks like in the video. And then anyway, so um, tracked him down to this like willow thicket at the head of the swamp. And I had permission from the neighbors because he crossed into the neighbors, and that was in their property. And I got down in there and I was just like, man, no blood. Now I'm getting down into what I know is bedding, and I don't want to like stir up their whole property for no reason. And based on that shot, I basically, what I was telling, there's a picture of the water hole. And then when I was telling like my cousin and a couple of guys I was kind of talking to about the situation, I said, basically, my guess is this deer's dead in the first 100 yards, or he's not going to die. It's either going to be like you get enough lung to kill him, or you hit that artery under the spine, or you hit the allegedly non-existent no man's land, which I think is just really a high lung shot that doesn't cause enough trauma potentially. I don't know. But anyway, so I get down to that spot in that swamp, and I'm just like, like I don't want to stir this up if I don't have to. So I backed out. I think I text you. Did I text you that day? No, I went back to that list you sent me because I basically I was looking for a thermal drone guy.
Yeah, you did, and I didn't put. I don't think we got into why or
Yeah, well,
possibly did. I think you were asking for you were looking for an operator list or somebody that offered
yeah.
that service. Yeah, I do
So,
remember that.
well, and I was and well, it's kind of twofold because I was looking for a guy anyways because I wanted to do a herd analysis on our property. But anyway, so I called a couple drone guys, and they all were basically like, well, yeah, I called the drone guys first, and they were like, yeah, basically there's so many leaves on the trees right now that we're gonna have to wait until tonight to come out and do it. And I was like, well, fuck, I'm like, I don't want to wait until tonight because if he is dead right in here and it's gonna get warm, then it's just gonna be ruined. The meat's all gonna be bad. So then I called. Well, one guy had a dog and drones, and he was gonna come out at like 5 o'clock. And then I got a hold of another guy that was a little bit more, well, a little less local, I should say, and his wife could come out. She's a very experienced handler, but he's like she can come out right now. I'm gone until next week or whatever. So anyways, this gal comes out with a dog, and we go back in. Now it's a little bit later in the day. The leaves are all dried up. The dew's dried up, and now I can see a little bit of blood. At first, I really couldn't, but the dog was like pulling into the same general area, not really following tracks. So I just took my time. I found a little bit of blood. I worked my way. Eventually, I made it all the way back down to that same exact spot with blood. The dog is like, it's like this willow thicket that's probably, like 20 by 40 rectangular, not rectangular shape, but total area. And it's just like willows and some reed canary that's hung up in it and some shitty multiflora rose around the edge. Just enough structure and cover. And the dog kept on pulling to the head of this spot, but never really went anywhere from there. I kept on finding more blood, and eventually when that blood was pointed going into this swamp at the other end of this willow thicket where this trail kind of cuts across the swamp, I called her back with the dog, and she got back on the track thinking like, oh, maybe he's gonna go this way, and ultimately the dog ended up right back where he was. He really wanted to go up in that spot. And it wasn't until I got down, followed that blood back to the bottom edge of that willow thicket, and she was on the top edge of that willow thicket with that dog, that all of a sudden I heard branches breaking and something running, right? So I boogie back around to follow the noise, and I get eyes on him, and there's the buck running away. And I couldn't see the arrow in him. I couldn't see the wound or anything. I couldn't see him limping. I couldn't tell if he was limping. He climbed this really big hill, and that right away I was like, well, obviously he's not injured too bad climbing that hill.
Right.
I couldn't see any blood or anything. And I combed through that willow thicket. There's beds all over in there. I couldn't find any arrows. I couldn't find a bed with blood. I couldn't find anything. And within a couple of days, he turned back up on camera on that one across the road. So I thought in my mind, I was like, well, silver lining is he's probably just going to shift, this accept this pressure for what it is and shift to that fall range a little bit sooner. So I was just going to stay on him. And I had that drone guy scheduled anyway to come and do a herd analysis that following weekend. So when he came up that weekend, which would have been 5 days, it was that following Sunday, so 5-6 days after the shot, essentially
Yep.
5.5 days. I told him, I was like, I hit this deer. So, while we're doing the survey, I want to try and find this deer and make sure he's not like sitting there like festering or septic or like dying somewhere, right? And we found him, and he was at the time. He was across the road where that cell camera put him anyway, and he was like shredding a tree, just looking like a big old mature buck doing mature buck things. But I think you can see in the drone video, I just actually played it back on my computer the other day. But if you look close in the drone video, I think you can actually see the broadhead like punch through his backside, but not break the skin. There's like something pushing out the skin out in one spot, which just goes to show how damn tough they are, right?
Yep.
So that was the first part of my season. Uh, I guess technically, if you call like tracking that deer hunting, then it would be an extra hunt in there, which I also had eyes on my target buck, I guess. But it just made me feel like shit for a couple weeks. I hate injuring animals, and also I
Yeah.
just like in my mind when I replay that scenario over again, I was like, I've made shots like that, but that's also like a shot that probably shouldn't take. I just forced a shot, and like, you know, but also in hindsight, I'm also like now I'm like, well, maybe I just need to practice more. I used to do it a lot more, but I haven't in a long time. Like I'd set my pin at 20 and I'd shoot at 20 and then I back up to 30 and back up to 40 and I just shoot with a 20 pin and see like, oh, it drops that much at that range. And now I'm going to go back and just compensate. I haven't done that in a long time. So that could be the problem. But anyway, so that's that day, October the 7th. I bumped that buck out of that bed, confirmed he was alive. That day, I immediately went and like readjusted all my cameras, pulled the stand, and like basically prepped everything to hunt him in his fall range. And this other buck, my plan B slash number 2 buck, was this like a younger deer for sure, but just super funky deer, And when it comes to killing deer, like I love a great experience. I love killing big deer. I love killing old deer. I love killing unique deer. And this was a truly like super unique buck.
Yeah.
And if I owned the entire farm, was the only one that hunted it, and it was management area, I'd probably let him go and see what he would have turned into. But at the same time, I was like, I don't want to pass him up. Nobody in the right mind's passing up this deer. He had 2 drop tines, double beams on one side, and 15 points. But like I could see visibly he was a younger deer. But anyway, so he was my number 2 buck, and I knew just based on where I was getting pictures of him on like this food plot. That's kind of like the core. It's like the anchor in this valley, and just consistent pictures of him there. I'm like, I know he's going to turn up when I start looking for this other buck in that same range, and I know I'm going to encounter him when I'm hunting for this other buck just by like playing the wind in the areas that I predict a mature buck to be. So I had the conversation with myself, and I was like, I'm not even going to second guess it. Like if I see that deer, I'm killing that deer, right? So anyways, I adjust these cameras, I hang a stand set, and basically prep to hunt this one specific bedding area that as long as I've been monitoring it, I'd say the last 5 years, a mature buck consistently shows up in this area right around the end of October. And the only challenge is it's really only huntable, and the bucks are really only there on an east wind or no wind at all. Like that's just what I've observed both hunting and with trail cam. Not saying they're not there, but they don't show up on the camera, right? So this spot in particular, I'm like, okay, I've hunted this spot a few times. In 2023, I had a really good encounter actually with the dandelion buck in this bedding area as a 3-year-old. They're on the edge of this bedding area, I would say. But it's the deer still bed on this edge. It's like really thick in some areas, and then it kind of thins out, and the deer still kind of bed there, at least until the pressure increases on the farm. And yeah, two years ago, 2023, I was after this big 8 pointer, and um, this dandelion buck has a 3-year-old, like it's just gorgeous, small, like really tall 10 pointer. Then came in and bedded down like right in front of me. I hunted all day in the rain that day, and he was bedded down like half the day, like just hanging out with me in the worst spot, bedded almost at eye level as the hill goes up, looking right back at me where I can't even get my phone out of my pocket for like 3 hours. It was
Yeah.
brutal. But I had a really good encounter with my target buck that day, and he kind of skirted me. And then after that year, I went and I adjusted the setup a little bit. Right, I'm almost always hunting mobily. I mostly run like 2 to 3 mobile setups in tandem, so I always have at least one in my truck. But if I go into a spot and it's good, I'll leave it hang for a couple days, or I kind of just like bounce them around. And again, this time I just pre-hung the spot, so I just don't like leaving stands out. And if I do, my cousins are hunting them, just kind of willy-nilly sometimes. And also it's, maybe somewhat of a liability thing too, a random person climbing up a tree stand I hang. But anyways, I readjusted that, and then I cut some trees, kind of choked off one of these trails. And then the other thing that I did was, when I went in there on October 7th and threw that camera up, removed one of those cell cameras, I found the primary scrape that's in there. Usually there's always a community scrape along the edges of those bedding areas like that. And it, the spot that it was in, I used to be able to shoot that spot, but I hadn't hunted this spot in a couple of years. And I moved that stand, and now I'm like, oh man, I don't want to recut all these lanes and change all this stuff this close, or like in season. So basically I went and I broke the licking branch off of that scrape, and then I created a new mock scrape, like 20 yards, just like swinging, like, from 10 o'clock in the tree to just about noon, or like probably like just like 1 o'clock, and created this new mock scrape, threw a camera up. And I don't know if it was like within a day or maybe even the same day, I got pictures of that buck, the funky buck, on that camera. My nephew called him Tumbleweed because he's just like kind of a mess. But so he shows up, and then, like, he was on that camera pretty consistently, like every, at least once a week he was on that camera. So October 24th rolls around, or 23rd, and I go back to the farm. I didn't hunt at all. I took my son out youth hunting. But also I kind of like, after we did that drone survey, I just like didn't feel ethical, like going after that deer in that area for a little while. So I just kind of like let it sit. And the next cold front was the 23rd. And I went back to the farm that afternoon, checked some other cameras, did a little bit of scouting, dropped down that valley again, sat that observation sit, saw a pile of deer again. Never saw that buck. But I kept on hearing this like really, I actually put the notes in my phone as like strange gorilla grunting noise. And this buck was like grunting up in the woods, and he was making this like like gorilla, like huffing noise. And and I have no idea if that's actually like part of the story or not. It's just an observation that I had. And anyways, I slipped out of there, went back home, and I actually had scheduled invited all the neighbors to our farm that Friday night for a community deer cooperative meeting, trying to just have conversations with these guys about hunting and get them all on the same page and communicating at whatever level they're comfortable with. And anyway, so I had to come home and like prep for that, and load up some stuff. And so I drive all the way back, get home at, I don't know, whatever, 9:30 at night, get the kids in bed, dinner, get some stuff done, go to bed, get up at 2:30, 3 o'clock next morning, pack up all my shit, load up the truck, get showered, drive all the way back to the farm. I'm getting there a little bit late. It's like I got in there and got on stand at 7:10. Sunrise that morning was 7:20. So I was basically going in at legal shooting light. But at that close to bedding, I kind of was like, deer shouldn't be back too like that early. And anyways, I get in the stand and start seeing deer, probably within a half hour, 45 minutes, and a couple little does, a couple little bucks. And the challenge of this spot, it's pretty good access, all things considered. But the challenge of it is it's very close to our hunting cabin. And my cousin had texted me the night before and was like, "Hey, I'm coming up to hunt Friday through the weekend." And I was like, "Man, like I really like my time frame to hunt this bedding area where it's always prime is like the 24th through the 26th." And I was just like, "Man," and I need an east wind. And there's east wind. There's no wind on Friday morning. There was east wind on Sunday morning. And I was like, I got to try it Friday morning because once these guys are up at the cabin, the pressure is going to change in that area, and you just don't know how it's going to affect the deer movement. And I think for the most part, the deer don't go anywhere crazy. They just don't move as much. Period. So I uh, I made that call, right? But the other challenge with it is that it's so close to bedding that most of the time when I hunt it, I just commit to an all day sit so that if deer come in bed next to me, I don't have to try and get out without bumping them, right? And that's exactly what was, you know, going to play out essentially. So the saw some couple deer like down in the valley behind me towards that cabin, and then a doe family group came up in, and there's three generations of does. There was a real like a doe fawn, last year's doe fawn, and the nanny doe. And the doe fawn came in and bedded down like 10 feet from the base of my tree, like almost immediately. And then the other two like milled around right over my shoulder. And this tree is basically a telephone pole. There's no cover on it. It used to be all closed canopy until we thinned some spots and took out some dead ash trees. And so there's no cover. So you really have to be mindful of your movements. And here's me, a 220-pound dude sitting up on this freaking telephone pole, camera arm, bow, all this stuff hanging off of it, right? So I knew I just had to mind my movements very closely. And I, these does are right behind me. The other thing that I did in that situation and will do in similar situations is I hang my pack from my bow holder to create more like back cover and like kind of break me up a little bit more. Usually I hang it either from the camera arm or low so I can reach it easier or like, whatever. But so anyways, these does are milling around right here. My wind's good. There's no wind, but the thermals are coming up and they're kind of pushing back. And before that, they're coming down, they're pulling down, similar to what an east wind would be doing. But anyway, so these does come in, and they're hanging out there forever, and all of a sudden I look, and I'm the area I'm kind of watching, just kind of listening, and I hear. Let me back up before I looked. I heard that freaking like like gorilla grunt again. I've heard deer like kind of make deer make a lot of weird noises, but I've never heard it like quite like that. And but instantly in my brain, I'd already kind of like painted this picture like, oh, that's got to be like that deer or a mature buck making that noise. And so as my eyes are kind of drawn to this area, I kind of just am watching. And sure enough, I see some movement, and I swear I catch a glimpse of this drop tine. So instantly I'm like, all right, he's here. He's maybe going to come in. Maybe I need to throw a grunt. I don't know. But what I do know is that as soon as I move, like if I move from my binos, these does are going to bust me because they're right here. But I had to make that decision. And ultimately, the decision was that I'm going to bust them intentionally right now before they screw me over. So I grab my binos and I just commit to bringing them up, and I bring them up slow, and I'm watching these does. And the second I move my binos up, they peg me, and this doe is looking at me. So I just take one hand and I go down. I just like kind of start flagging behind me, and they spook and they stop for a second. They look back and they're licking and smelling, stomping, and then they blow a couple times, and then they run down the valley and they blow a couple more times and they're gone. Problem solved. The buck, watching him through the binos now, he's just like on high alert, trying to figure out what these does are blowing at. But at the same time, he can't smell me. So he's like, whatever, I'm coming in. So he comes in anyway and just reads the script. It takes him quite a while to work his way in. He's cautious, but ultimately he commits to that scrape. And I didn't even grab my bow because I just wanted to watch him. I wanted to get another good look at him. So I ended up getting some pretty cool video of him, and then waited until he got on the scrape and grabbed my bow and took my time and settled in and pinwheeled him. And he didn't know what happened. Kind of just ran. I think he only went like 30 yards and flopped over dead. I was like, All right, that's it. It's a wrap. So that was it. That was my season done. Now I'm just waiting until gun season to get Remy, my son, out on some action, and then we'll clean up some does later in the year, and feels good. Okay, good work. See you in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, it was your season lasted a little bit longer than last year, so you got that going for you.
That's true. I
You got
did
the most
though.
out of your time.
I did. I did piss my wife off at the early part because that one extra night that I hunted during that first 3 day stretch was when the torchlight parade was. Did you work at that this year? The torchlight
Yeah, yeah.
in Alaska, and I did feel bad, and I told her I was just like, I know, I understand. Like the kids love this. It's fun. Like I do enjoy going, but I'm like, I know where that deer is right now, and I'm very confident that I can get eyes on him again, and then I'm done. Then I'm done for the year. And like half of hunting these bucks is knowing where they are, right? When you know that they're like kind of stuck in an area, you got to make a move. And then it didn't pan out, and I was just like, God, I felt like an asshole again. I'm just like, ugh. But yeah, it
Yeah,
all worked out.
that's part of it too. It's hard when you're like, I don't want to say half-assing it, but when I'll you don't commit to putting all your time in one stretch. Like that's what I struggle with too is when you only get a day here and there and it's all kind of just like you're throwing paint at the wall and kind of I always do better when I get a week to 10 days to just go out there and like figure stuff out after a few and get in a groove where you get one day a week and it's just so hard to put something together.
Yeah, you're 100%. That's 100%, and that's why another reason I like hunting out west, or actually, that's probably more so a mentality that I learned from hunting out west more, where it's like you go on a trip to hunt, and there's definitely been times where I didn't have this mentality, but I wasn't nearly as successful, right? Like when I go out west, whether it's antelope or mule deer, like those are my favorite things to chase right now. Anyway, it's just like, okay, I'm here for one reason alone, and that's to fill this tag, right? There's byproducts of that, right? Like obviously I'm there for the experience and the challenge, the fun, all those rewards that come with it. So I don't want to be like super shallow and say I'm just there to go kill something, right? But that's my primary objective. So whether if we're at camp, we're talking strategy, I'm laying there thinking strategy, I'm thinking about my next move, what am I going to do the next day, and then some situations I'm thinking, where the hell am I going to get my water, when am I going to make food, there's a lot other things you have to think about as well, but it's a lot easier than like bouncing to work and then bouncing back, right? Like checking in, checking out.
7 to 10 days is all working towards that goal and you're focused one way or another
100%.
on that until it happens where, you know, here you got work, you got clients to deal with, you got kids, you got all this stuff that breaks up your time to where you kind of need to sacrifice your time a little bit.
Well, and that's exactly it, and it's hard. The other challenge hunting whitetails in most areas, in our farm included, I've got access to a pretty big farm, but just the way it's broken up, the way it lays out, there's a lot of limitations. It's not like out west where the limitation is your physical fitness and your mental fitness, essentially, right? Like how far are you willing to push it to go? If I see that deer go over that hill, are you willing to go over that hill? Whereas like hunting deer here in Wisconsin and be like, well, I don't think they're on the land right now. There's nothing I can do about it. And you
You
only
can't
know.
just you can't just if you want to have success like in your situation, you can't just go in there, oh, I have 7 days to hunt. I want to just hunt for 7 days. It's not that easy. Like if you need to be strategic about it and when you
Well,
hunt, where you hunt, you can't just pound it for how many days in a
if you're
row and
trying,
expect to.
correct, if you're trying to target a specific deer, if you're just going to hunt deer, right? And like one of my cousins, maybe even two of my cousins have been up at our cabin hunting this entire week. And, just for them, that's like they're taking their vacation, they're going there, they're just going to relax in the cabin or hunt. And that's great. And that's fine. Um, they're investing all their time in one lump sum, essentially, right? Where I like to, again, be more strategic because I just know also like what it takes. It takes more time in general, right? And I'm looking for, a different goal essentially. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. When you can commit all that time to it, um, you can be more successful. The issue with that, especially this time of year, is that, if you're committing 5 to 7 days, that might be 5 to 7 days where there's no activity on your property because that's the rut, right? Depending on the size of your property. And that, again, that's another advantage I've had over the years is like, oh, I'll hunt this area of the farm or scout this area of the farm this time of year, and there's just not much going on. So then I'm bumping to the next spot and like, oh, not much going on. And like, this 8 point here that I killed, a buck that I stalked and shot in his bed a couple years ago. That buck, the reason I killed that deer was actually was the 2 years prior, I want to say. Trying to remember that timeline. Maybe the year prior. It was like kind of a similar thing. It was the year before that, 2022. I was after a completely different buck. This buck, I saw him once while hunting another buck, so he was like kind of in that area. But anyways, I was hunting this other buck in this one valley of the farm, and I just couldn't. It was impossible to cross paths with him like consistently. He was barely on the property, and when he was on the property, he was running does. This was one of those situations where like you're seeing bucks, but they're flying by you, and there's no shot opportunities, and super frustrating. And anyway, so I hit my breaking point one day, and I was like, I got to go just see if I can find a plan B. So I went over and scouted just the next valley over on our farm. Our farm sits right up on this ridge, and it's just like a couple valleys that flow off. So I go scout this other valley, and my strategy again, outside in. So I go around the back, and I get to this spot where there's a pretty good pinch point back there, but ultimately I can see like down into this valley from a really good vantage point. And within 10 minutes of being out there, I hear a buck running around down that bottom grunting, and I get eyes on him, and it's this like pretty dang nice, like probably 140 plus inch 8 point frame with a like 6 inch drop tine, just like kind of one of those racks where it's like, oh, it's just a nice clean. Whoa, where'd that guy come from? This big drop tine. So, and actually, that was kind of a fun situation. That particular encounter, eventually when it kind of settled down, what I realized was this buck was pushing some other bucks around, and he had a doe pinned down in this like brushy little draw down there. So I actually texted my brother and sent him an Onyx pin. The cell service is terrible on our farm anyways, but I sent him a pin. I said, if you can get to this spot without bumping the deer, I bet you can kill a really nice buck right now. And I just like, that's all I said to him. He's like, I'm on my way. And I just watched it play out. And so I could see him come in from the top of this valley, and then he disappears. And I see him pop up here, and then he disappears. And I see him pop up there. I was like, holy shit, he's really close. And then deer just running all over. And then I don't know until after, because there's no service again. So when we connected later that night, he's like, I was 15 yards away from that doe, and I couldn't see the buck. And then the doe took off running. And then I realized that the buck was like, he got in between the buck and the doe essentially. And the buck ran past him at like 10 feet and shot out the end of the valley. And anyways, so that has nothing to do with me killing that deer. That was just the fun part leading up to this story. I kind of abandoned that. Again, I went back after my target buck, but then it was like 5 days later, literally the night before, because now in Wisconsin, you can hunt up until the night before gun season. You can hunt with a bow. So literally the night before, I was like, one last ditch effort. It snowed a little bit the previous night. So I slipped down in that valley. Now down in the bottom, I come in from the other side, slip into the bottom. And there's this one tree in the bottom of this valley that when you get up in it, you can look up into the head of this valley. And there's a spot, a real tight draw up there. It's not super thick. There's like pockets of thick, but not, it's a cattle pasture. So it's not super, super thick. And there's a pocket in there where deer like to bed a lot of times, but I never saw it from that vantage point under this situation, which was with that fresh blanket of snow. So anyways, I'm climbing up this tree, hanging my stand. It's a pretty good spot. You can see a lot, but there's a couple of really good trails you can shoot to. And I only get 2 sticks up, maybe 3 sticks up. I'm getting up high enough. And I look up to the head of this valley, and I can see a deer bedded up in this snow. And I pull up my binos, and it's this 8-pointer with this drop tine bedded in front of this log up in this spot, right? Okay, boom. That's basically the end of the story. I didn't hang the stand. I didn't want to stir anything up. He gets up, he walks around, disappears, never see him again. Just literally found out like a week ago that the neighbor shot him a year later. I never even saw a picture of him again after that. So it was kind of a weird situation. But anyways, fast forward to 2023, thinking from that vantage point, when I came in to still hunt through that bedding area, I was looking for that log, and I found that log, and that buck was bedded right next to it. And that's ultimately where I killed him. So, it's like the experiences we have a cumulative effect over time, right? And that's another home field advantage thing. It's like if you learn your land and learn from these scenarios, like you build this catalog of experience where, and then that's the other reason I like hunting out west, because most people aren't going to approach things that way if they just have like well, if he's in that area, then I got to hunt that stand or that stand and wait for him to come to me. And that's, the safer thing to do more often than not. But I just, with that deer in particular, he was not moving at all during the daylight. I'm like, my gut told me that he was hanging out in this bedding area. I'm like, fuck it, I'm going in after him. And it just worked out. The other 99 times out of 100, it doesn't work out. And it just worked out. So it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, it gets pretty wild. It's just fun, I guess, like hunting. Like I just
Yeah.
like a good hunt, right? I just want to hunt. I
Right.
don't want to, I'm not against box blinds. I've got a couple out on the property, when the weather's real crappy, or if I'm taking a kid out, or, some of my older uncles and stuff. I mean, they're great for what they are, but in an area that I hunt, there's so much pressure. There's 17 other guys that hunt our farm that, if you're going to kill a deer, you have to like be calculated and make some moves. Very rarely, maybe I've told you this before. I've talked about it on other podcasts, but I've never killed two bucks in the same place on our farm ever. Every single buck has been a completely different spot. Does, I kill a lot of those in the same spots because I just shoot them with a 400 Win Mag or 300 Win Mag at 400 yards late season. So there's like, these fields that I can see from easy vantage points. But yeah, it's just, it is what it is. So, but anyway, how's your season going?
Well, I should have had one the first week, that cold front in September. I think it was the 21st. It was like the first day I hunted all year. And my goal was to just kind of observation sit next to a spot where I wanted to check some cameras that I had soaking pretty much all summer on some scrapes that are used like year round. Set up in the dark, had a really, really nice buck come by at 25 yards,
It was
like
a morning hunt.
morning hunt. Yeah, that early,
Yeah.
which it just set up
Hmm.
well for it, just because it was a
I'm
cool morning. I had everything was I knew I wasn't going to blow it up by doing that, but it kind of was in the game essentially.
Yeah.
And he worked a rub. I not come to find out, he had a rub line coming right down below where I was set up out of the standing corn, or he was bedded up against it, is what I was thinking. Um, 25 yards. Come to find out, I don't know if I bumped my bow off or something, but I was hitting like 3 inches low, and then ended up hitting him essentially how far my bow was off, probably 4 inches low,
Okay.
non-vital. Never found him. Had a drone come out, got video of him the next day. Um, Never
Well,
seen the wound because it was very
I feel
low
your
on him.
pain.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have been super happy because he was a really nice deer. He was wider and like thick all the way out on the beams. He didn't have like long points, but he was like super gnarly and like short tines and
Yeah.
really thick and wide. But the season would have been over quick. My season would have been over quick, but I guess
You're still behind the shoulder, just really low.
correct.
See,
It was like, yeah,
that shot
it was like in front of where you would get maybe some guts. It was like below middle of the body, but too low for it
low.
to like hit
I mean,
anything
I just
vital.
had a friend text me yesterday. It was a video from his friend. Uh, he shot a buck. I forget what the yardage was, but he hit him really low. and like this far behind the shoulder. And I was just like, he's like, "What's your thoughts on this?" He had really good blood for, and he showed sent me a picture of that, and there was a lot of blood. I don't know if it was like spots of that or consistent like that, but he said good blood for, what do you say, for the first 200-300 yards, and then he backed out, or he lost blood at 200 yards. Good blood up until then, and he backed out and went back in the next day, found two beds within the next 200 yards and no deer, and they backed out and called a drone. So the drone was already on the way, and I was just like looked at the video. It was pretty clear. I mean, you can basically see the arrow go in and come out like almost like mid chest cavity. Like it's such a steep shot angle and it's so low. And I was like, ugh. I'm like, that to me looks like a live deer. And 2 hours later, he sent me a text. They found the deer with the drone, and he never did confirm, because he said they were in a hurry to get it on ice. But I'm guessing, every deer's anatomy is going to be slightly different, right? It's not unreasonable to think that, or I would say it's unreasonable to think that they're all the exact same. But all I could think was like, well, maybe his heart sat back just a little bit further, and he caught just enough heart, like shot the bottom out of that heart on the way through. Because the heart, they don't die super fast on a heart shot compared to a double lung. Double lung and heart, obviously, or take the top of the heart off is pretty crazy. But if you just like hit them through the heart, they're losing a lot of blood, but they're still, the lungs are the pump, the heart is the valve, so they're still pumping a lot of blood. A lot of it's pumping out sometimes, but it's not. This is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So, but yeah, I was surprised, and and case in point, like I've seen a couple shots. I've certainly made bad shots like that. Uh, and usually the deer survives, and a lot of
And
times
it
they're
was,
perfectly
yeah,
healthy because they can lick it, they can reach under and lick it, and keep it clean, and then it doesn't get infected.
right. And it was one of those things too where he was like 25 yards and I wasn't super high up in the tree either. I was only like two sticks up, but it was he was almost too close to where like by the time the bow goes off, it's one of those situations where you get like a gut reaction where you hit the deer,
Yeah,
but it's not like super definitive because by the time you like blink and you look up, the arrow's already through.
yeah,
So it's kind of like guessing. Gut reaction was, man, that was kind of either far back or low. And I mean, it was good blood right away, but it only lasted for 60 yards and quit.
yeah,
So it was
yeah.
pretty.
That's typical muscle hit. Then they bleed
There's
like
nothing
crazy.
vital.
Yeah, which ultimately, like, and that's, I think that's the nice thing about the drones. I still have kind of mixed feelings on them in general.
The ethics about them are one thing, but the effectiveness
Well,
is
yeah,
kind of
and even like the
unarguable, I guess.
ethics, I don't even think it's like the ethics in general. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with recovering a deer with a drone. Uh, I think it is the most ethical thing to do whatever you can to recover that animal, right? I just think that there's a lot of lines that probably get crossed. I've
Yeah,
heard
but
some stories of some people, but
it's one of those things where you put that technology at people's fingertips and it's just going to get abused by some.
correct. Everything
It's
does.
just what it is.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, like, it's no different than the guy that's got 75 cell cameras on 40 acres, right? It's like, you're literally running like constant surveillance on these animals. It's like, Jesus Christ, would you like to live on that property as a deer? No privacy? You know what I
at
mean?
that point, it's like, is it killing? Is it hunting? Like, what are you going to
Mm,
categorize what you're doing? Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, but I think, the drone thing is cool. I mean, that was my first real experience with it, like watching him over the shoulder
It's
doing that
it's
survey
cool
and
when you
stuff.
find someone that's the when I was introduced to it, it was someone that I've known previously and like I knew he was like had experience with like tracking and he like hunted for a living prior. So like he understood deer and tracking and that kind of deer behavior, which is huge. Like
Yeah,
if you find a guy that actually understands deer and you give him that technology, it's like fun to watch him work and
yeah. Well, and that's that.
you can learn a lot by watching them track a deer. Like
Well, and that's where, this I don't even know what the guy's name is. What's this dude? The Whitetail Research YouTube channel. He's been doing those research studies with drone. You know what I'm talking about?
Is he a younger kid?
Yeah, I think well,
He
youngish.
like
He seems younger.
is it the one that he like took a year off of hunting and just
Yeah,
pretty much just
yeah,
watch deer every day?
yeah. Watch. Yeah, exactly. Just got followed some mature bucks around.
Yeah,
He's
I feel like I didn't look in. He's been on like a ton of podcasts. I haven't really
yeah, and
listened
his
to.
YouTube channel is like completely like freaking blown up like crazy. Um, but anyways, I see that, and I think it's very interesting. And I'm not knocking him in any way, shape, or form, but like you said, there's a lot left to be desired from watching deer with a drone. Like you can only tell so much, and from like a property perspective, and the reason I bring this up is because I've seen now is like drone uh what I forget how they're like framing it, or basically like drone consulting businesses where like they're flying drones over and then telling you like where deer are bedding and helping you do this. Like, well, you still need to get boots on the ground for a lot of that stuff, most of that stuff.
I don't know. I feel like you can tell where deer are during certain parts of the day, certain times of the year, and maybe very generic behaviors or like large scale things, but like you're not sitting there watching what they're doing and their tendencies like you would be like.
Well, in a survey, like, so what I'm actually adding as a service level this year, I'm trying to be as absolutely thorough as possible all the time. Like that's always been my goal with these plans, right? But with technology, one of the things I want to do and I'm offering this year, and that's why I was working with this guy, and I'm trying to, and actually that's the reason why I asked you for that list initially, was I want to network with a bunch of these guys because I want to find local guys. And essentially what I want to do is before I even show up to the property, and ideally during season, I send a drone guy there to do a herd analysis on the property and mark everywhere that he spots these deer bedded, right? But that information, which would only be given to the client after season, so it's not, it's like not like, hey, like yeah, I'll tell you if there's a giant buck on your property, but I'm not going to tell you where,
Right.
right? I'm just,
Yeah.
but anyways, that information would be the most applicable, but also it's also all relative at the same time because where those deer bed or where they are doing whatever the hell they're doing on that given day is all based on conditions. So whatever those conditions were that day, that's valuable to understand. But if they change, if the wind's out of the west or the north, say, and I do the survey, well, that doesn't really tell me where deer are on south winds or east winds or whatever, right? So you'd almost have to do a lot of different surveys to be, call it thorough, right? But I think that there's a lot of value. First and foremost, the herd analysis is what I want the most out of. Like I want to be able to show up on a property and say on November 15th, the drone thermal drone survey showed that you had X number of bucks, X number of does. Of these bucks, we estimate that this is your age class breakdown, and your buck to doe ratio is this. And then we have a baseline metric, and then from there we take that and we talk about habitat management, all these things. But that's a big thing because what I see, the hardest thing that I see on these properties I'm working to improve, the biggest obstacle in improving them is the sheer number of deer. It is really hard. You have to do big projects and you really have to intensively manage the invasives because the deer keep all the natives just mowed to the ground because they're so starved for that type of quality forage, right? So it's just a big deal. But anyways, and that also limits potential on a property if your herd sex ratio is way out of balance or off of what it should be, or your age structure is really poor.
And
And
with not knowing that number for sure, I mean, there's only it's a good like you said, it's a good baseline to know like an actual number that you can quantify and like make a plan for like how to improve it one way or another in your ratio does to bucks. Whereas before you can kind of guess, but like how accurate are you really being? Like it doesn't take an expert to know you have not a lot of deer here versus a lot,
well,
but
and the
you
other
really
thing,
don't know that exact number.
well, and one of the things that I really like about that in general is exactly that. It's like how many people, and I was having this conversation with my cousins the other night. When you talk about like leveling up or gaining experience, like total hours logged, the vast majority of hunters aren't logging a ton of hours, right? You know, and if they are, they're more of what we were talking about. They're just like kind of recreational opportunities. Like I'm going to go out and hunt. It's not like studying, being a student of the game, of the woods, of the animals, right? So, so what we were talking about is, you know, like early on, like kind of in your mind, it's just like deer are kind of just like there. Like you have deer on your property or deer show up in this area where you can see them, but you're not thinking nearly as much about like where are they coming from, where are they going, right? That's like one of those simple like steps in understanding movement. And trail cameras don't tell you the whole story. They never will, you know, unless you have a shit ton of them, which again, like I don't, it's not worth it. So that's where I think just doing that drone survey in general and being like, well, you know, like there's there's not a single buck on your property, but there's 15 does. And like, now let's go walk your property and assess your habitat and be like, well, you don't have any browse, you don't really have any very good cover, you know, and then on top of that, you've got all these does here. So you need to reduce your doe population a little bit and also just improve your habitat, which is going to draw in deer and mature bucks specifically and all these things, right? So basically where I'm going with that is like, I think the drone thing's great, but I think that to really have a drone survey be effective is exactly what you just said, is like the same with tracking, is like having someone that understands deer and knows deer and the trackers. And that's my biggest argument against, or I shouldn't even say argument, but like reservation with drones is there's a whole different level of like intimacy involved with a dog handler and a tracker. And, you know, these guys that are flying drones that also are trackers, like they understand that. And like you said, they've learned so much from following that dog and understanding how deer move when they're injured and all these things. But that's the other cool thing, you know, and they even told me right away, that lady was like, well, the dog, her husband, I think was the one who said, he's like, the dog will kind of let us know, like we'll know if that deer's alive or not. And she told me 3 or 4 times, she's like, the way this dog's acting, that deer is almost certainly alive. But we'll check again, we'll check again, we'll check again, and boom, pop it. And you know, and then even after that, we watch this deer run off. We take the dog over, put it on the trail. He doesn't want to follow it. And like that dog knows that deer is not going to die.
That's the one thing that I have just picked up, and I didn't know this until like this last year. But I don't know if it was from videos or listening to a couple podcasts about guys that have dogs, but and how that process works, because I've never had one actually track a deer and talk to a handler or anything like that. But it's that relationship with that dog to where it's not necessarily that there could be a steady blood trail, but they can say that that dog is uncommitted right now because that deer's alive,
Yeah.
and you could be
Well, the
following a good
dogs,
blood trail, yeah,
a lot of
and
times the dogs won't even follow the blood.
they'll give up, yeah, and
Yeah.
they're like, he's
Or
giving up
like this
because he
dog.
knows its deer's not fatally hit.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it is very interesting. And, you know, and obviously my biggest like hesitation with the drones is that the actual hesitation is that like I don't want to piss off the neighbors. I don't want to like, you know,
It's an invasion of privacy thing.
it's
It's just like
it
you
is.
get
I
to
mean,
see
it's also an
everything right
invasion.
there. Like,
Correct. I mean, it's kind of an invasion of privacy again of like the deer on your farm at some level, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's pretty cool. You know, it's just cool to see it and do it. But ultimately, like I like the data. I like hard numbers and metrics where you're just like,
and it's for
we can
someone like
speculate all we
you,
want, but this is what it is, right?
yeah. And for someone like you that does the work that you do, it's sometimes hard, I'm sure, to convince a client what you're doing is right. And this is why we're doing one thing or the other. When they have a hard number in front of them saying, like you said, this is the number of deer you have, your ratio of does to bucks is way out of whack. We need to do this. It's, I feel like, way easier for them to be on board when they can see that firsthand that, okay, this is exactly what we have, and not just like have them doubt what you're
Yeah.
doing.
Well, and
Not that
that's
they should anyways, but
but no, but you're spot on because I mean, ultimately, that's always my first and foremost, like my main objective is to create a plan for them that they're confident in. Because if you create a plan that they're not confident in, then they're less likely to carry it out, right? So I don't want to leave them confused or second guessing. I want to show them numbers, show them statistics. That's where I always like pretty much everything that I share with them. I'm citing some research paper or some source of information where I was like, this is my theory and this research supports that. Like all the way back to when I was talking about like the four key elements. For years I would talk about like how consistently mature bucks show in the same areas around the same time every year. And then they came out with that study about the genetics that are passed on from does to their offsprings that dictate the same like 3 to 5 day window of estrus every year with that specific gene, right? I was like, well, okay, that's probably what it is. It makes sense. These bucks then understand, like, that, and in combination with how the habitat changes and food sources changes and pressure change, right? But ultimately, they're drawn. I mean, they're motivated by survival and sexual reproduction. All animals at some level are or should be, and if not, there's something wrong with them, right? Which is kind of like, if you're a scientist and you're studying a frog population in a pond and all of a sudden a large majority of those frogs are no longer contributing to the breeding population, then there's probably something going on there, right? And I don't know if you're catching what I'm stepping in, but I'm kind of hinting towards this analogy of our human society, how all of a sudden there's just like massive increase in like, you know what I'm saying? So there's something going on basically, but with deer, that's all they're motivated by. So if that's something that's very consistent and predictable in an area, follows year to year, then it just makes sense that those bucks are going to show up there. And obviously, we're talking about deer. They can smell that estrus doe from how far away when the wind is right. So, those are just kind of examples, right? It's like if you can back something up with data, and maybe you don't have to, honestly, in this industry, you don't have to, right? I always joke around with my wife. The first really big buck I killed on our farm was the first time she was ever back at the farm with me while I was hunting. She'd been there before, but the first time, so she like was kind of there when I was like doing my scent free or like getting ready to go, packing my shit and stuff, like in the zone. And the reason I remember this because like I got, I always like get dressed outside. Uh, I don't believe you can cheat a deer's nose, but I think you can trick them to a level where like maybe they don't think you're as close as you are, if you get caught, or buys you a little bit of time. But anyways, she tried to give me a hug and I was like, no, don't touch me. Like you smell like a human with all these things on you. Like don't touch me. And she kind of laughed at me, but I killed that buck. And she didn't grow up in a hunting family or anything. So, when the neighbors found out and everyone stopping by and wants to see it, and then we take it to the local watering hole in town and weigh it and big buck contest, and everyone wants to take a picture with it, and you're telling the story over and over and over again. Like to her, it could have been a spike and she wouldn't have known the difference. But she was just like so like taken back by like people's reaction to a deer. It's just a deer. Like it doesn't mean any shit to her, right? But I always tell her, I was like, well, when everyone's asking me questions, I'm like, honestly, I could say that my secret sauce was shoving Mentos up my ass, and that gave me the edge to kill a deer like that. And that someone out there is going to try that because that's just how it is, right? Like the
Yeah.
people where I'm going with this is like people in this industry and all industries, but really in this industry, because for so long there was no hard data. So everything was anecdotal and opinions and just like my theory is this, I can't prove it, but it is, what did I just hear? What I just saw someone say something, east wind. What was the saying? Something about east wind never win. East wind something. Basically, it was saying that east winds are bad to hunt on. I'm like, well, I just killed my target buck on an east
Honestly,
wind.
like I was just talking about this on my last podcast about east winds, and it's like when a majority of your winds are northerly or westerly or southern winds and you get that oddball east,
Mm-hmm.
usually it's pretty good. And I've had very
Usually, it
good
makes them
luck
move.
because exactly it makes them shift because it's the opposite of what they normally see. So they have to move in some sort. If you can get ahead of that movement, I mean, you can kind of plan ahead for that a little bit. And it seems
Yeah,
like
my
they
my
always did
go-to
move a
is
little
to
bit better.
well, and my go-to is just to like I prefer, like if I have to pick one day by looking at the weather, I'm not picking a day specifically because of a cold front. I'm picking a day because of a big wind shift. Because like you said, when that wind changes, they use different bedding areas, they approach food sources differently. One way or another, they generally get up and move, for a period of time to and settle in a new spot. So I always key in on the wind shifts. More often than not, you get a cold front with a wind shift or a weather front. And almost always before a rain front or something, you'll get an east wind for a period of time. So, but yeah, again, there's just a lot of opinions and anecdote out there, anecdotal theories and whatnot. So I try to just back them up because I guess in my mind, knowing that these plans and a lot of these projects result in a lot of expenses for the client, and like I want to be able to justify this personally and give you the confidence to justify it that this is the right move. You're going to get some, the best return on your investment essentially. So the drone thing, like I said, is just another layer to it. It's no different than, to me, it's no different than, if we're on a property that's got a lot of timber and, we're going to be doing some serious cutting on there, I always bring a forester in to get another opinion on it. Like, this is my plan. This is what I think. What's your thoughts on this? And usually they align. Sometimes they go either way. But then, if it's something that I don't necessarily agree with, then I will have that conversation with the forester and trying to get a better understanding. I'll incorporate the client into that conversation and just kind of talk things through. And I've certainly been wrong on things and certainly changed my mind on things. And that's why I do it, because you can't undo that type of change, right? On habitat. And really it's a simple thing. It's like, oh, I can bring a forester in for a few $100 extra and get his experience and his opinion on something very specific on this property, right? And it's more data and more perspective essentially.
Sure. Um, I'm probably gonna wrap this up here pretty soon. Um, I know we kind of were a little bit all over the place, but it was good hearing like about your season because I feel like it's a nice break from the grind of it all. Just hearing some successful stories and some more
Well,
laid
yeah,
back, just deer talk, I guess.
and like the rut stuff, I mean, I've been talking rut strategy so much right now. So it's like, I mean, we can talk rut strategy. I mean, my rut strategy right now is just you gotta be out there,
Right. I'm
you check
off for the next 3 days and I'm just don't have any plan other than being in the woods and just
yeah,
moving around until I find
hunt
action.
smart,
That's
you
essentially
know,
it.
yeah, yep, hunt smart as you can, keep the pressure off as much as you can, and find spots where you can post up where, close to bedding areas, transition corridors, downwind of does. That's where I want to be right now. I want to be downwind of wherever the does are going to be, and hope that I can get in and out of there without bumping deer. And that's it. That's that's the full. That's how I. Right now, if I were hunting right now, I mean, that's what I would be doing, is just trying to figure out any breadcrumb or any clue I can find that pulls me into an area where there's mature buck or my target buck, and I'm trying to get downwind of where the does are going to be, because inevitably that's where that buck's going to be when he's cruising. And the other thing too, I'll just leave you with this, is like, because this is the other question I get a lot. Um, Probably 15 people in the last 24 hours have texted me and be like, "You think we're still in pre-rut? You think the bucks are locked down? You think this?" Like I,
Let's just say there was does and estrus 2 weeks ago, and there is going to be does and estrus 2 weeks from now. So just
correct. Well, that's where I don't even look at it anymore. I never even look at it as like, I do think there's a pre-rut, but in my mind, whether this is correct or not, and obviously it's all like a construct of however we label it anyways, right? uh, the pre-rut to me is like when those bucks are getting more aggressive, making scrapes, covering more ground, kind of scoping things out, and then they start seeking. But ultimately, once we hit the rut here, it is just a cycle of, oh, a buck's seeking, a buck is shadowing, locked down, whatever you want to call it, then they breed, and then they're generally back and they're seeking again. So it's like this 3 to 4 or 5 day cycle where that, if you're following a specific buck, he's going to go into lockdown for a few days, and then he's going to peel off that doe and he's going to be cruising for usually not very long, 12 hours at max. Sometimes it's longer, just depends on how many does you have. And then he's back to lockdown. And that's the cycle you're in from here on out. Like you said, for the next 2 weeks, and then you might catch that buck where he takes a day off, and then he's going back to look for those does. So, but no, it was great chatting with you, great catching up with you. Good luck to you. Hopefully you're dialed in now, and
Get the
I know
monkey off
you,
my back sooner or later. I got about
yeah,
2 weeks to do it before gun season rolls around, and then after that, I usually don't do too much late season.
yeah, it
So
gets real challenging after the woods have been pillaged by the Orange Army, right?
yeah,
So,
we'll uh
all right,
we'll get together at some point after the season and talk some more habitat stuff. But before you hop off, I know we didn't do any sort of intro whatsoever. We kind of just got right into the meat of storytelling, which is fine. I it kind of gets repetitive having people talk about themselves too, and I can see how that's awkward for
yeah,
that person too. So
I don't like to talk about myself a whole lot. I like telling stories, like sharing experiences, but I
yeah,
don't like, hey, this is me. But yeah, I mean, my name is Thomas Mlsna. I am a full time habitat consultant slash land manager. Um, my business name is the Untamed Ambition. That's my Instagram handle. So if anyone has any questions or they want to follow along, that's where you can find me. And
and I would suggest if anybody has any habitat whitetail questions whatsoever, whether that's whitetails or whatnot, reach out to you, and I'm sure you can at least give them some sort of tidbit or point them in the right direction because you know about as much as there is to know about whitetails. So
well, yeah, there's always more to learn.
yeah,
Say that,
and that's the mindset to have too. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, as soon as you think you have them figured out, something changes. But that's the fun part, right? I love that chess match and whatnot. But yeah, this is the time of the year where you got to be out there. It's just a grind from here on out, right? I mean, anything can happen at any time. But yeah, good luck. Thanks for having me on. It's good chat.
appreciate it. Thanks for hopping on.
No problem. Take care. Have a good night.